In 1858, a nun in a remote French convent gave birth to a child she claimed was the second coming of Jesus Christ. What I'm about to tell you is so bizarre that the Catholic Church tried to erase it from history for over 150 years. This is the story of Sister Marie-Therese and the miracle that divided Europe, sparked religious riots, and revealed the darkest secrets of convent life. And no, this isn't about faith or divine intervention. This is about the most elaborate religious deception ever orchestrated by the human mind. By the end of this video, you'll understand why even the Pope himself called this case the devil's greatest triumph disguised as God's miracle. Convent of Sainte Marguerite, rural France, 1858. The same year that Bernadette Soubirous claimed to see the Virgin Mary at Lourdes, another religious event was unfolding in secret that would make those visions seem ordinary by comparison. Sister Marie-Therese, a 23-year-old novice nun who had taken her vows of chastity just 2 years earlier, was about to become the center of the most controversial religious scandal of the 19th century. But Marie-Therese wasn't your typical nun. Born into a wealthy merchant family, she had been sent to the convent not out of religious calling, but because her parents discovered she had been having an affair with a married man. The convent was meant to be her punishment, her path to redemption. Instead, it became the stage for what some called a miracle, and others called the most blasphemous deception in Christian history. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about religious miracles and the lengths people will go to for power, attention, and escape from their circumstances. Because this isn't just a story about one woman's claim to divine pregnancy. This is a story about mass hysteria, religious manipulation, and how an entire community became complicit in what may have been the most elaborate hoax ever perpetrated against the Catholic Church. The year 1858 would become known in church records as the year of false miracles. But what made Marie-Therese's case truly extraordinary wasn't just her claim, it was how convincing she made it, and how far the church went to cover it up when the truth finally emerged. It all begins with what the convent records call the Night of Divine Visitation. On March 25, 1858, the Feast of the Annunciation, the very day Catholics celebrate the Virgin Mary's conception of Jesus, Sister Marie-Therese claimed to have received a visit from the Archangel Gabriel himself. According to her testimony to Mother Superior Agnès, Marie-Therese was praying alone in the chapel at midnight when a brilliant light filled the room. The angel appeared, she claimed, and told her that she had been chosen to bear the Christ child for the second time in human history. The world was ready for Jesus to return, Gabriel allegedly said, and Marie-Therese was to be the new Virgin Mary. But here's where the story gets truly bizarre. Marie-Therese didn't just claim to have been visited by an angel. She claimed to have physical proof. She showed the Mother Superior what she said were marks left by Gabriel's touch. Strange glowing symbols that appeared on her arms and chest. These marks, she insisted, were divine signs that would prove her story to any doubters. The Mother Superior, a practical woman named Agnès de Montclair, was initially skeptical. She had seen enough young nuns claim divine visions to know that most were either seeking attention or suffering from what we would now recognize as psychological disorders. But there was something different about Marie-Therese's case. The marks on her skin were unlike anything she had ever seen. They seemed to glow with their own light and formed intricate patterns that resembled ancient religious symbols. More disturbing still, Marie-Therese began to display what appeared to be supernatural knowledge. She could quote passages from religious texts she had never read, speak in languages she had never learned, and predict events that later came to pass. When the local priest, Father Dubois, came to investigate, Marie-Therese told him details about his own past that no one else could have known, including sins he had never confessed to anyone. Within weeks, word of the miracle began to spread beyond the convent walls. Pilgrims started arriving, hoping to witness the divine pregnancy for themselves. Marie-Therese's belly began to grow, and she claimed to feel the Christ child moving within her. She said the baby spoke to her, telling her of the new kingdom of God that would be established on earth after his birth. But the most shocking part? Marie-Therese wasn't the only one who claimed to witness these miracles. Other nuns in the convent began reporting their own visions, their own divine experiences. It was as if the entire religious community had been touched by something supernatural, or something far more sinister. But wait, because what I'm about to tell you about the investigation that followed will reveal the true genius behind this deception. As news of the miracle spread, the Catholic Church found itself in an impossible position. If Marie-Therese's claims were true, it would be the most significant religious event since the original birth of Christ. If they were false, it would be one of the most dangerous heresies the Church had ever faced. Either way, they had to investigate. The Church sent Father Antoine Moreau, one of their most experienced investigators of religious phenomena, to examine the case. Moreau had debunked dozens of false miracles throughout his career, and he arrived at the convent expecting to quickly expose another fraud. What he found instead shook his faith to its core. The glowing marks on Marie-Therese's skin were real. Moreau examined them under magnification and found that they seemed to emanate light from within the skin itself. Medical doctors brought in to examine her could find no explanation for the phenomenon. The marks weren't painted on, they weren't caused by any known chemical reaction, and they couldn't be washed or scraped off. More puzzling still was Marie-Therese's knowledge. During his interrogation, she demonstrated an understanding of ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Latin that surpassed that of most church scholars. She could recite passages from religious texts that existed only in the Vatican's secret archives, texts that she could never have accessed. When Moreau tested her with questions about obscure theological concepts, she answered with the precision of a trained theologian. But here's the detail that historians have tried to hide. Moreau's investigation revealed that Marie-Therese wasn't acting alone. The entire convent had become part of what he called a conspiracy of faith. The other nuns weren't just witnessing miracles, they were actively participating in creating them. Moreau discovered that the convent had been receiving mysterious visitors in the months leading up to Marie-Therese's divine pregnancy. Men dressed as traveling merchants would arrive at night, bringing supplies and staying for hours in private meetings with the Mother Superior. These weren't ordinary religious pilgrims. They were educated men with knowledge of chemistry, medicine, and what we would now call psychology. The investigation revealed that the convent had been transformed into what Moreau described as a laboratory of deception. Hidden chambers had been constructed behind the chapel walls, filled with strange apparatus and chemical compounds. Books on subjects ranging from ancient languages to human anatomy were discovered hidden throughout the building. Most disturbing of all, Moreau found detailed plans outlining how to create the appearance of divine pregnancy, complete with methods for simulating the movement of a child in the womb. But the conspiracy went even deeper. Moreau discovered that several of the pilgrims who had come to witness the miracle were actually paid actors, hired to spread word of Marie-Therese's divine pregnancy throughout France. Letters were found proving that the story had been deliberately planted in newspapers across Europe, creating a wave of religious fervor that brought thousands of believers to the convent. The question that haunted Moreau was simple: who was behind this elaborate deception and why? The answer he uncovered would shake the Catholic Church to its foundations. You think you know where this is going? You're completely wrong. The truth behind this conspiracy is more shocking than any miracle could ever be. Because Moreau's investigation revealed that the conspiracy wasn't just about creating a false miracle, it was about something far more dangerous to the Catholic Church. The men behind the deception weren't religious fanatics or attention-seeking fraudsters. They were members of a secret society dedicated to destroying the Church's power from within. The group called themselves the Illuminated Shepherds, and they had been planning this operation for over a decade. Their goal wasn't to create a new religion or to promote false miracles. Their goal was to expose the Catholic Church's willingness to believe in and promote obvious frauds, thereby destroying the Church's credibility with the faithful. The plan was diabolically clever. They would create a miracle so obviously false that any rational investigation would expose it as fraud. But they would make the fraud so elaborate, so convincing in its details, that the Church would be forced to either endorse it or admit that they couldn't tell the difference between genuine divine intervention and human deception. Either outcome would damage the Church's authority. Marie-Therese herself was both victim and willing participant in this conspiracy. The Illuminated Shepherds had identified her as the perfect candidate, a young woman with a scandalous past who was desperate to escape her circumstances and willing to do anything for attention and power. They had spent months training her, teaching her the languages and theological knowledge she would need to convince investigators. The glowing marks on her skin? They were created using a phosphorescent compound derived from certain deep-sea creatures, applied using a technique that made the substance penetrate deep into the skin tissue. The supernatural knowledge? She had been given access to rare manuscripts and trained by scholars who specialized in ancient languages and obscure religious texts. But here's the most disturbing part. The pregnancy itself was real. Marie-Therese was actually pregnant, but not with the Christ child. She was carrying the child of one of the conspiracy's leaders, a man who had seduced her as part of the plan. The conspirators had calculated the timing perfectly, ensuring that her pregnancy would coincide with their manufactured miracle. The plan was for Marie-Therese to give birth to the child, claim it was Jesus returned, and then watch as the Catholic Church either endorsed the obvious fraud or was forced to admit their inability to distinguish between genuine and false miracles. Either outcome would serve their purpose of undermining church authority, but the conspiracy had one fatal flaw. They underestimated Father Moreau's investigative skills. As he dug deeper into the case, he began to uncover not just the methods of the deception, but the identities of those behind it. What he discovered was a network that extended far beyond one French convent. It reached into the highest levels of European society, including members of royal courts and even other religious institutions. Moreau realized that exposing the conspiracy would do exactly what the conspirators wanted. It would damage the church's credibility and authority. But allowing it to continue would be even worse. He found himself in an impossible position. Tell the truth and help the church's enemies, or cover up the truth and become complicit in the deception. The decision he made would have consequences that reached far beyond the walls of one small convent. But what happened next will change everything you think you know about how the Catholic Church handles scandals, because the cover-up was more shocking than the original deception. Father Moreau made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He chose to cover up the truth, but not in the way you might expect. Instead of simply suppressing the investigation, he orchestrated what he called the divine solution, a cover-up so elaborate that it became a conspiracy within a conspiracy. Moreau realized that the only way to defeat the illuminated shepherds was to turn their own plan against them. He would expose the miracle as false, but he would do it in a way that made the church appear wise and discerning rather than foolish and gullible. He would make it seem as though the church had known all along that the miracle was false and had been conducting a careful investigation to protect the faithful from deception. The plan required sacrificing Marie-Therese. Moreau arranged for her to be exposed as a fraud, but not as part of a larger conspiracy. Instead, she would be portrayed as a mentally unstable young woman who had deceived herself and others through a combination of hysteria and deliberate deception. The real conspirators would remain hidden, their identities protected by the church's need to maintain the fiction that this was simply the case of one disturbed individual. On December 8, 1858, the feast of the Immaculate Conception, Marie-Therese went into labor. But instead of giving birth to the Christ child as she had promised, she delivered a stillborn infant. The church immediately declared that this was proof that her claims had been false from the beginning. God, they said, had prevented the blasphemous deception from reaching its conclusion. Marie-Therese was quietly removed from the convent and placed in an asylum, where she spent the rest of her life. The official church records state that she died in 1863, still claiming that she had been chosen by God, but that evil forces had prevented the miracle from being completed. But here's the chilling detail that Moreau recorded in his private journals. Marie-Therese's child wasn't stillborn. It was murdered. The church couldn't allow the child to live because its existence would have provided ongoing evidence of the deception. The infant was killed shortly after birth, and Marie-Therese was told it had died naturally. She never learned the truth about what had happened to her child, or about the conspiracy that had used her as a pawn. The illuminated shepherd's plan had failed, but not in the way they expected. Instead of exposing the church's gullibility, they had demonstrated the church's willingness to commit murder to protect its secrets. Moreau's investigation had uncovered their identities, and over the following years, several members of the conspiracy died under mysterious circumstances. The church's reach was longer and more deadly than the conspirators had imagined. But the story doesn't end there. Moreau's private journals, discovered only in 1982 when the Vatican opened certain archives, reveal that the case of Sister Marie-Therese wasn't unique. The church had been dealing with similar conspiracies for centuries, and had developed sophisticated methods for identifying and neutralizing threats to its authority. The journals describe a secret department within the Vatican, known only as the Office of Divine Verification, whose job was to investigate claims of miracles and divine intervention. But their real purpose wasn't to verify genuine miracles. It was to identify and eliminate false ones before they could damage the Church's credibility. According to Moreau's records, the office had been responsible for covering up dozens of similar cases throughout the 19th century. False prophets, fake stigmata, manufactured miracles, all had been quietly investigated and suppressed. The Church had learned that in an age of increasing scientific knowledge and skepticism, their survival depended not on promoting miracles, but on carefully controlling which miracles the public was allowed to believe in. The case of Sister Marie-Therese became a template for how the Church would handle similar threats in the future. The combination of careful investigation, strategic cover-up, and when necessary, elimination of witnesses, became standard procedure for dealing with religious fraud. If this story has shocked you, wait until you see what I've discovered about the secret Vatican archives and the other divine pregnancies that the Church has covered up throughout history. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because what I'm going to reveal next will make Marie-Therese's case look like child's play. And if you want to know about the most disturbing religious conspiracy that's still active today, leave a comment with divine deception, and I'll reveal the truth about the modern-day cult that claims to have the real body of Christ. Trust me, what they're doing with it will keep you awake for weeks. But before you go, I need to tell you something that will blow your mind. Father Moreau's journals weren't the only documents discovered in the Vatican archives. There were also detailed medical records of Marie-Therese's pregnancy, including photographs of the stillborn child. And here's the thing that will haunt you. The child didn't look entirely human. The medical records describe physical abnormalities that the doctors couldn't explain. Elongated limbs, unusual bone structure, and most disturbing of all, what appeared to be additional organs that served no known biological function. Whether these abnormalities were the result of the chemical compounds used to create Marie-Therese's glowing marks, or something else entirely, we may never know. We'll see you in the next video, where we'll explore why medieval kings believed that eating their enemies could make them immortal. And spoiler alert, the archaeological evidence suggests that some of them might have been right. The DNA analysis we've uncovered will change everything you think you know about the true source of royal power. Until then, remember, the most dangerous lies are often wrapped in the most beautiful truths. And now you know that even miracles can be manufactured by those who understand the human need to believe in something greater than themselves. Sweet dreams.